Hey, this is Collin Moshman for CardRunners.com. Today's quickie is going to be on the heads-up raise fold call equilibrium using the very cool Holdem Resources downloadable calculator. So let's start off and say we're 15 blinds deep, heads up against a tough reg, and we want to play unexploitably. So what is our strategy going to be? So we might go to the raise fold call charts on Holdem Resources, but the problem is that we're going to be restricted to only hands profitable to open shove when we're the button, and furthermore, when our opponent is the button, he can min raise, in which case we have to respond to his strategy and figure out what hands we want to 3-bet and how we want to respond to his button min raises. And that's where this program is going to come in handy. So let's start off and say that we're 15 blinds deep in a heads-up sit and go, although in any heads-up format the same analysis is going to apply. Winner take all, of course, and the button is going to be min raising. We'll vary that a bit later in this video. And the question is, what hands is the button going to be opening, the big blind 3-bet shoving, and then the button calling it off with? And we actually get a full answer to that question. So the small blind's playing almost 3/4 of hands, the big blind 3-bet's very wide in equilibrium, and then the button calls it off fairly wide as well with the top 36% of hands. So this is great that we get this full answer to the question, and notice that the small blind is going to play quite a few more hands than if you were playing a shove fold game. Okay, so now let's say we're playing shove fold, the exact same parameters, and he's only playing 46% of hands, whereas in equilibrium we see that he's playing almost 75% of hands. Now, as a quick caveat, there are still other options for how either the button or big blind might want to play. For instance, maybe the button wants to open limp some of the time. Maybe the big blind wants to 3-bet small some of the time. So the button min raises, he makes it 3.5 blinds and has some range for calling it off and possibly some range for folding. But with that said, having the raise fold call ranges is invaluable. So let's vary some of these parameters, and the first one is, let's say that we make the effective stack a bit deeper. Okay, so now we're going to go to another raise fold call hand, and so let's say we have a 1000 effective stack, which in a heads-up sit and go would usually be stacks of 2000, 1000. However, now the blinds are going to be 25 and 50, meaning that we're 20 blinds deep. So what do we expect to happen in terms of these three ranges? So think about that for 1 second. And what we probably expect from the button's perspective is that he's going to be opening more hands, since the danger of getting 3-bet is a bit less at the higher effective stack. He's going to be calling it off a bit more narrow, since he's getting less compelling odds. And from the big blind's perspective, there's a worse risk-reward ratio, meaning that he should tighten, but at the same point, there's a wider gap between the open and call ranges, which would otherwise, all else equal, make him widen. And so we're a little bit unsure as to the effects on the big blind's 3-bet range, but we do expect a wider gap between the button's open and call ranges. So let's see how this plays out. Okay, so sure enough, the small blind goes from opening 74% to 84%. Instead of calling it off with 36, he calls it off with 33, which is still pretty wide if you think about it. You know, we're 20 blinds deep, min raising and calling it off with a hand like King 7 off. And then the big blind is actually 3-bet shoving a pretty similar range, as the two effects we discussed earlier seem to roughly be canceling each other out. Now, if we go in the opposite direction, we should see the exact opposite of that, namely that the small blind is going to open a bit tighter, he's going to call a bit wider, and uncertain effects on the big blind's 3-bet shoving range, but possibly fairly similar. So let's go ahead and pull that up. Now we're going to say that we're doing a raise fold call analysis where the same effective stack of 1000, but now the blinds are 50 and 100, and we'll keep the min raise for now. And sure enough, now he tightens a bit, he calls it off even wider, and the big blind's 3-bet range is again fairly unchanged. So this is going to be a theme we're seeing, that in equilibrium, facing a min raise at a lot of different stack depths, the big blind 3-bets a bit under 50%. So that has been the most constant thing we've seen so far, which is actually a pretty interesting result.